Hello and welcome back to CamBro Conversations. Today's conversation, I'm lucky to be joined by Dom McGregor. Dom, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Pleased to have you. And so much that I could go with when asking you, because I've listened to your podcast guest appearance over the years, followed you closely on LinkedIn and enjoyed your content. But I think recording not long after the 7th anniversary of that first investment in Social Chain, I was keen to understand what happened before that and what were some of the kind of commonly experienced student problems that you experienced that led to you understanding the power of social media at such a young age?
Yeah, it's a great question. 7 years feels like a very long time, but also like a very short time in the same moment. Before that, obviously, we were trying to figure out what we were going to do. We had this incredible media powerhouse behind us, and we had no idea that could have been a business. So it started when I was at university in Edinburgh, not far from where you are. And yeah, I started an account called Student Problems, which was, in my mind, just my life at university. And people always ask me, like, why was it successful? I always say, well, the reason it was successful is because I was just a typical student. I was like run-of-the-mill average and experiencing what everyone else was experiencing. So it was just relatable to every single person up and down the country. So yeah, we from that background, we built more and more social media pages. And social media at this time was question marks over whether it's going to be here to stay. So we were just trying to figure out whether there's actually any value here, doing something we enjoyed. It was a bit of a passion, making jokes, creating trends, creating content. And obviously, this was long before the days of becoming a content creator or a social media influencer were a career choice. It was just passion. So that's what happened before. And we were obviously then from that advising a lot of people. So we understood social media, we understood trends, we understood young people. So a lot of businesses were speaking to us from like a perspective of how can we advise them on what they're doing and their marketing essentially to those students.
What do you think you and Stephen knew that other people didn't know at that point?
Nothing. I don't think we knew anything. I don't think there was a case of we didn't have a kind of philosophical vision where we could sit there and plan it out. I think we were just operating in a sector which we were very early in. We were operating in social media, and obviously from practically doing it for 2-3 years, we've got good at it and we understood social. So that was kind of what set us apart when it came to speaking with businesses, because we're living and breathing it every single day. I don't think necessarily we saw an opportunity or knew an opportunity apart from other people. It was a case of we actually walked the walk and built big social communities before they were, as we see now, kind of the staple of every single brand strategy.
Yeah, of course. It's radically different now when you look at where a company and a corporate business allocates its marketing spend. A huge chunk of it is now going towards social because they realize that's where people's eyes are. And I guess you and your role at Social Chain in those early days would have seen that radically shift over time.
Yeah, but also we had to convince people that's where it was shifting. This wasn't something where marketing directors woke up and said, oh, "Okay, now I'm going to put all money into social." They had to be told about this. They had to be shown about this. They had to be led by the insights, the sales, the data. All that kind of stuff had to happen. So it wasn't a case of consciously just doing it. These businesses had to be convinced, and that's what we did. We had to convince these people that social was the future and the present.
What were some of the things that you used to compel businesses to make that change then? Because at the time, you're both young guys, potentially not even dropped out of university yet when it's still growing.
Yeah, it's a good question. How do you convince people? But we are the target audience. We were 19, 20 years old at the time. So if we say this is happening, then that comes much more credible than potentially people from outside the demographic. So the fact that we were young actually helped. So it was more convincing to hear it from young people than it was to hear it from maybe older people or other people, because did they really know? We definitely knew, and we could show them the figures, we could show them the insights. But I also think, we were experts in that sector. So we were experts in social. So we could talk about it so credibly that businesses listened.
What were you doing with the Student Problems page at that point? Because it was a Twitter page, wasn't it, where you were just tweeting out about the kind of different things that students experience, and of course everyone would resonate with that through their own university experience. But how did that become a community in the sense that you've described it as we build social communities rather than just a large Twitter page?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Obviously, having that kind of initial base of followers helps to direct people elsewhere. So once you've got an understanding of how to grow a platform, it becomes much more easier to kind of snowball bigger audiences. So we transitioned it into different social medias. We kind of gave it a bit more of a mature brand look, took it from a kind of funny Twitter account to something more meaningful. And that's essentially what the process we took with a lot of our pages. We started to acquire pages in sports, gaming, food, and we did the same process. We professionalized them, new logo, new branding, trademarked the IP, improved the standards of content, diversified the platforms they were on, and professionalized it essentially. And that's what it took it from being like just a bunch of kids running Twitter accounts to actually these guys are actually proper media publishers and actually have got the finger on the pulse of what's happening with social media.
You were speaking there about compelling people. So obviously you were compelling businesses to trust in you as their social media agency. What did Stephen say to you that compelled you to drop out of university? Because you were on that traditional track of get into a good university, studying at University of Edinburgh. How does that change and why?
Yeah, it's a great question. What did he actually say? I don't think it's anything necessarily, the words he said in terms of this, and this. It was a case of, an opportunity presents itself, and I'm a strong believer in the reason people go to university, the reasons you're supposed to live your life is to take these opportunities when they come across you. We might only get one in a lifetime. We might only get a handful of other ones, but you've got to take them. But what's the point of doing anything to put yourself in a position where you can create opportunities? People talk about luck and all these kind of aspects, but being able to act upon it and make the jump is actually where I think the value comes from, rather than those who sit there and be like, well, yeah, an opportunity arose, I just didn't take it, and then call other people lucky. The luck stops once you decide you're going to do it. People obviously get things always, people always come up with opportunities for things, but you've got to decide when to jump. And it was a case of the opportunity feeling enough for me to make that jump and make that commitment.
Were you entrepreneurial growing up, or was this a bit of an unusual set?
I wasn't an entrepreneur. I wasn't the kid selling sweets at school, but I was I had self-belief. I had belief in myself and my capabilities that I never knew what I was going to do when I grew up. I never thought I'd do this, or I had a kind of a path. I just believed that whatever I do, I'd be fine. And that was literally the words that you say to yourself. So I'll be fine, whatever I do. And that's a self-belief which I took from young age through everything I did. And again, when it comes to that, making that jump, the only person that can tell you you're going to do it is yourself. So I was always back myself to do things.
What was reinforcing that self-belief during this process then? Obviously the metrics of seeing the page growing, seeing clients taking you on, but what else alongside that?
Good question. I mean, the self-belief starts when you make the jump, and it stops when you make the jump. Then you've come into different territories that doubt yourself a lot more. So as much as we've got positive signs, we've got negative signs, and you come back to that core belief in yourself that no matter what happens, you'll get through it. So things that started to reinforce it was the first client win, the first time you paid, the first time you paid yourself, that first time of generating your own income. All that kind of stuff. The first time you could go on holiday by yourself, having to earn a wage. These little things, these little mini wins in the early days were kind of like reinforcing it, and it just reinforced that the jump was the right thing to do, and the belief I had in myself was validated.
From the outside looking in, it just looked like continuous growth with Social Chain, kind of 2014 onwards, just continuous win after win after win. Was that the case behind the scenes as well?
It was, but every win was also massive problems. A win in a contract is one thing, executing against that contract is another thing. So we were winning, but that necessarily doesn't translate to success. It actually translates in a lot of times to more problems. So as much as, that was the truth. We were winning and we were growing and we were having great success. However, it doesn't always translate to monumental success within the operations. So that was true. And, without one, you don't get the other. So you've got to take the lows to manage the highs.
Now, obviously, you've had a successful exit and sale of the business. But what were some of the wins within that period that kind of stand out to you that you look back and you think, I'm really proud that I was involved in that?
There's a couple of contracts which we won, which were like, nail biting moments where we snatched defeat we snatched victory from the jaws of defeat, in the kind of old saying. So there's a couple of points around that. Big multinational campaigns, big client names, clients that Social Chain still works with today. So there's loads of things that I was proud of, but I think the biggest thing I'd come back to was the growth of the people. That was the thing I'd always come back to be most proud about. That would definitely be, the thing I look back and say that was what is the legacy, or the thing I was most thrilled about from Social Chain.
Yeah, I'm quite lucky to have a little bit of an insight into that. And then I've worked with Zach Hancock on a couple of campaigns, and I know he was heavily involved in the content creation, and he cannot speak highly enough of the framework that both you and Stephen gave him to grow into the man that he is today.
Exactly the kind of case studies I talk about. These guys, everyone from Social has gone to do great things. Zach is a perfect example of it.
Yeah, that must just give you like a lot of, like, how would I put it, like moral capital in return as well as fiscal, because obviously we can all talk about the numbers behind Social Chain, but the fact that one of the things that you've highlighted as a big win is not a contract, but the support that you gave people is probably a testament to your own character.
Exactly, and that's what it gives you the moral win. I think it gives you actually the meaningfulness, which again, coming back into what I go again, is part of what you chase as an entrepreneur.
One of your TED Talks that I've watched before is titled along the lines of "You shouldn't want to be young and successful." Do you still stand by that, and why do you think that's the case?
Oh, 100%. I think it's really difficult to frame to people who look at young people burst onto the scenes, be it professionally in football, be it in business, be it in music or entertainment. I do believe it's too much too early, and unless you've got a really strong framework around you and really strong internal values, that it's only going to hinder you. Some people can't manage it, and other people could manage it, and I definitely couldn't manage it, and I then had to make thankfully, when I realized I couldn't manage it, I could come back from that. Not everyone can do that. So yeah, I stand by that. I think it's a thing to look back and say, like, I say to people, you wouldn't want my journey. You wouldn't want what I've gone through. You might look at it from the outside and think it's great, but you definitely wouldn't want to go through what I've gone through, because at times it was destroying. And that's that. I think I stand by that.
What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions around entrepreneurship then? Because I've just described it from the outside, it was win, 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 win. And then you're saying behind the scenes, it's firefighting and bringing on new staff and supporting people in order to fulfill these contracts. And then you've just said, you wouldn't want my journey. What do you think people don't see and aren't aware of?
I mean, everything behind the scenes, you never see the personal trauma, the sacrifices individuals make, the difficult parts, difficult decisions people have to make, with letting people down, firing people, all these kind of things, which it's your responsibility. And you're 20, 21 years old, 20 years old, you've got people who are having kids around you, and you let them go and ruin their livelihoods. But these are decisions you've got to make. So the outside of it, obviously there's huge reward in it. It's huge, in terms of the personal freedom, the economics around it. But it's a journey which, again, you end up cutting yourself 1,000 times just to get there.
Yeah, I think that's it. That's a pretty clear analogy, isn't it, in terms of that kind of those cuts. What were some of those deeper cuts then that you found the most challenging during that period?
Firing my brother, for example. Nothing prepares you for that. Having to go sober at 23 years old, to then not being able to do anything with your friends, because what else you do at 23 years old? Missing birthdays, friends, events, all that. It's just, you don't live a normal life, and you isolate yourself. People stop inviting you to things. The metaphorical cuts carry on in so many ways that, people talk about being a lonely journey, and it is a lonely journey. And again, coming back to it from being young, it's more isolating when you're young. When you're older, again, there's probably different situations where you've got family and you are less removed from social situations and you've got more of a better network around you. But when you're 22, 23 years old and like you're growing up and finding out who you are while having to build this thing on the side, it's like, God, it's like it just stabs you everywhere.
Yeah, you've spoken there about frameworks around you at a young age. What kind of framework do you think you would have benefited from as 22, 23-year-old Dom growing this behemoth?
Look, it's something I talk about quite openly. Obviously, with the new venture, it's having the right people on the table help. But that's a kind of metaphorically speaking thing for friendships as well, and girlfriends and partners. Thankfully, I was 21, 22. I had terrible relationships with girls, and then I met a great girl at 23. So that foundation helped me massively with everything I was doing in my life. So partners, family, how making sure your parents are there for you, all these kind of things, which maybe at 21, 22, when you distance yourself from things and you live a little bit of a wilder life and you're a bit more outgoing from that perspective, you make silly decisions, and it's being able to realize when those decisions are actually harming your life, future life, and getting a reins on them.
So yeah, that a lot of that's very personal in terms of like personal relationships that you have around you in terms of romantic, but also friendships. You made that shift away from maybe toxic romantic relationships. With regards to friendships, how difficult is it to move away from people that you've maybe spent a lot of time with over the years growing alongside?
It's difficult because I actually don't think the problem's on me in that situation. I think the problem's on people accepting what you're doing, because I'm non-negotiable on that part. This is my life. Come with it or not, and we'll do things together. We'll do this, but I'm not going to be coming to your Friday night pub session at 5:30 and complaining about my job. So to take it or leave it relationship where my friends know how I want to live, and they pick whether they want to be friends or not. So friends from when I was school, a lot of friends have accepted that, and I'm very close to a large number of them. Others have struggled with the changing circumstances and me not adhering to their way of life. So you meet new friends, you meet more like-minded people, you meet more people like that. And again, I'm blessed that I think I've got a lot of good people that are around me, from a friendship perspective, from when I was young to Steve, Ash, family and social chain, to people now in my life. So it's a constant evolving aspect of what these people bring to you. And I think in friendship you've got to be quite selfish.
Yeah,
I think you understand where the other person sits, and you've got to understand what value they bring to you. And if you can have a relationship based on mutual terms, then fine. But when you start having people who are sucking energy from you, who are resentful or are not wanting something different from the relationship, it's like any relationship, it's like a romantic relationship, and you've got to question it.
Yeah, you gave an example there about going down the pub on a Friday night and moaning about work and having some pints. And obviously that's very far away from the world that you're in with your sobriety, and we'll definitely touch on that as we go. But does that mean that you have a lot more entrepreneurial friends now, just based on the circles you move in? Do you need people around you that are doing the same thing as you to feel supported?
I don't think you do, but I just think naturally by diffusion, you get around people who are like-minded, because so many things going on which you speak to people about and you have that kind of comfort and close relationship with. So I'd say it just happens by nature rather than anything more kind of like purpose. You just enjoy spending time with people around you.
Yeah, it's not convoluted, but just based on the circles that you move in, you maybe meet people that you're like, I want to spend more time with you. And it sounds really harsh, doesn't it? But we do almost have a finite amount of space within our lives for friendship. So if somebody comes in that's really valuable, it might bump somebody else down the pecking order in a really harsh way.
Exactly. Obviously geography and things like that are important. So yeah, it's a natural process.
Yeah, no, I understand that. So you spoke there about going sober at the age of 23. What was happening before that drives such a big decision. And for context, a lot of my listeners will have heard me speak about sobriety before. I use it more from the kind of Chris Williamson school of sobriety, where he's very much using it as a productivity tool. And I've found that to be very beneficial for myself. And I've just completed 2 years, but I do know that I will at some point drink again if the occasion is right for me to do so. But I know that differs for you.
Yeah, and me and Chris have debated this at length on this podcast. So for me, it's the difference between the reasons of entering sobriety. People see it sometimes as a functioning tool of how they can become a better person, how they can have more time, energy, blah, blah, blah. Mine is a different kettle of fish, because mine in my mind, this is the way I've always viewed it, is a fundamental requirement for me to be alive is not to drink. And when you frame it like that, it's like, okay, well, you haven't got a choice really. So, if I have to accept that. I really do believe if I didn't stop drinking, I'd be dead. Yeah. So when you think about that, it's like, do I want to start that again? Nah, yeah. I don't want to start again. So that is, again, I talk about it at length, but it's that initial look at yourself and say, am I the problem? Yes, I'm the problem. Okay, I'm the problem. Okay, how do I figure that out? How do I stop? How do I change myself from being the problem? And then I remove that, and it's simple as that. It made me a much better person. And I don't want to even consider, dream of what it would be like going back to where I was.
You had a bit of an identity though as a party animal and the guy that you could always get for a night out. I think you even won most likely to be drunk in your final year at school. So there was that, at a young age, you've got that level of relationship with, oh, Dom, he's great to go on a night out with. Yep. How do you move on from that?
Exactly, that's the point. People who meet me now, they can never pitch that person. They can never see that this individual would be the life and soul of the party. He'd be out every single night, and people cannot fathom that it was possible. So that's why I talk about these things more openly. It's like, I wasn't just someone who was like, drink didn't agree with me, so I stopped. I was like the person you would look at your friendship group and be like, he is a fucking lad. Oh, go on, Dom. That is me. And I realized that it tipped over the boundary of being for fun and being enjoyment and being socially acceptable to being, this guy is like on a destructive path to kill himself. So in that sense, it's like, okay, how do you you've got no choice. You've got to make a change. So again, going back to the purpose of why going sober, it was a life choice that I had to do. So you've got to learn to live with it. And again, going back to the part about friendships, that transition was so abrupt. It was like, Dom will be at every night out. Dom will be the center of attention. Dom will be getting drunk. Dom will buy people drinks. To Dom just sat in the corner drinking water.
Yeah, it's a radical shift, isn't it? Was there an accumulation of events, or was it one or two particular moments where you were like, stop?
Oh, it's a downward spiral. It's a deep, deep, deep downward spiral of constantly fucking up, constantly ruining your personal life, constantly upsetting people. And it's a slippery, slippery slope. I think if you have one occasion where, you can brush it off. If you have two occasions, you quite ask the question. If you have 7, 8 occasions which are happening every single time you drink, it's like something needs to be done here. So I think for guys especially, it needs to be multiple occasions of things going wrong for them to even accept that they're the problem. I think maybe a little bit different with girls.
Do you have any advice for guys then in that realm to how they can assess their relationship?
Yeah, but people don't like to hear it. This is the issue. People don't like to hear it. People don't like to say, well, maybe I have an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. Maybe I'm the problem. Can you imagine? Like, we found that difficult enough to say in our personal lives, let alone like to ourselves. I am the problem. People will not say that in relationships. They will not say that at work. They will not say that anywhere. Everyone is so focused on blaming external factors. Oh, so-and-so my boss. So-and-so pissed me off. So-and-so I need a drink. So-and-so. Now, that's everyone else blames everyone else for everything. So to say to people, you need to have a long, hard look at yourself and ask if I'm the problem, and really think about who you are and what you're doing, is so difficult for people to accept. And then it comes back to, that's just normal life. And then you start bringing in alcohol, which is a cultural acceptance in our society that maybe you drink too much, maybe you're drinking too much. Telling people that, their faces, they go so defensive. Because when you think about alcohol as well, alcohol is the only drug you don't have to justify taking. So if I tell people I don't do cocaine, they go, no, why? When I say I don't drink, people are so defensive, like, why don't you drink? Why don't you need to drink? It's like, it's so funny, and then people, when they can't, I don't drink, the first thing they say is, well, I'm trying to stop, I don't drink that much. And this is like, people are conditioned. When I talk about alcohol around people and that I don't drink, I promise you, hand on heart, the first thing people say is, oh, I'm trying to stop, or I don't drink as much as I used to, or all these things. People start to justify to me their drinking habits every time.
Yeah, I have very similar conversations, Dom, where people go on the defensive about what they have, and then they also straight away go straight to the peer pressure argument, like, oh, but I couldn't go to this event without drinking because such and such, or Sally or David would say, oh, have a drink.
Maybe someone else.
Yeah, it's shifting responsibility. No, I'm a huge advocate of personal responsibility, and I haven't heard the sobriety argument from that element before, where you've just said it's all your fault, you're the problem. It's heavy hitting. No wonder people flinch sometimes when you tell them that.
No one's going to admit that. No one's going to admit that. Oh, I drank too much. Oh, you poured too much into my vodka shot. Oh, those were strong G&Ts. Oh, I shouldn't have been doing that last night. Oh my God, what happened? It's people don't take people take less personal responsibility for alcohol than anything else in the world.
Yeah, it is incredible. It's also the only substance where, like, how wild a night out gets is almost like a benefit. So, oh, James broke his leg and ended up in hospital. That's like a sign of a good night out, which is crazy, because in any other walk of life, you'd be like, oh, we went quad biking on holiday and James broke his leg. It was a disaster. But, oh, we went to the strip on holiday and James broke his leg. It was hilarious. You're like, oh, well, not really sure how the two are acceptable, but one is acceptable and one's a disaster.
Yeah, but it comes back to that point of social norms. Is like, that's just really normal. Getting stomach pumped is like and he got his stomach pumped. Like, it's like an achievement. It's bonkers.
You said about being Dom that would be up partying up to hours, probably going back and doing all sorts beyond that. And then you just said about Dom being the man in the corner with his water. Do you find that you still enjoy going to events despite the fact that you're not drinking anymore? How have you found like the new normal?
Very different. So, you have a limit of how long you can be around people, which is fine. You have a limit on how many of these you can go to without being sick and being like, okay, this is the same as every single week. So yeah, you do less, but when you do some things, sometimes you can, you enjoy it more. So I do enjoy going and doing nights out with friends every now and again. I do enjoy, like, for example, this weekend I'm going on a pub crawl with friends from school. So like, there is things where you get up for them because they become more of a treat. I don't go out with my friends every weekend, so going out with them every now and again is probably more of a bigger deal for me than everyone else.
Yeah, no, I think that's very insightful. And I think even people who maybe don't have a real problem with alcohol, and we can talk about the scale of that problem, being more selective in the occasions that you attend, whether you're sober at them or whether you're drinking at them, is something that I think everyone would benefit from, rather than, like you say, ending up on a Friday night, having some pints, moaning about work as a habit.
Yeah, exactly. Like you say, habitual behavior becomes such an issue.
Yeah, there's been a lot of changes then. Obviously, 5 years sobriety, leaving social chain. But I saw you say on LinkedIn that the agency model is broken in the social media space now. Why is that?
I think it's always been. I mean, just in general, in the space in general, I think it's broken. I think agencies talk about alignment and partnerships. They talk about relationships having with their agencies and being able to grow together. But really, agencies care about retainers, they care about their fees, they care about making sure they're looked after, their people looked after. So when it comes to that model, the model doesn't have alignment. And I don't think if you've got alignment with people around the table for anything, it doesn't have success. So yeah, I think it's broken. I think the days of like integration of agencies and businesses are gone, because the people before businesses didn't in-house, so now they're in-housing. That's paranoia of people being poached. Platforms are self-serve, so you don't necessarily need an agency in some aspects. Yeah, I just don't like the model. I just don't think it's the future for the businesses, not necessarily the agencies, but the businesses that are looking at what to do. I think they should be working in housing teams when they can, and having control over everything. And all agencies can do is stockpile talent and hope people pick up the phone and say, we've not got capacity, we need you.
Yeah, okay. No, that's definitely interesting. And when we were getting this arranged, one of our meetings moved because you've got a role now within the, like, advising the government on Britain's digital economy and I think you spoke at the Conservative Party conference, which must have been fantastic. But what does the future of Britain's digital economy hold from somebody like you who has such an in-depth knowledge of social, but also other areas of the online world?
There's this massive paradox, right, where old people don't really get internet still, I'm talking older people. And the people who understand digital are like 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds. Like, in a lot of instances, those are the most valuable people in companies now, really. You look at some of the kind of digital things they can do, like they're transforming businesses up and down the country, but their skills not appreciated versus other people still. But also they don't understand what they can do with their skills and where their careers can take them. Obviously, yeah, we know people can be influencers. Yeah, that's kind of like step one. But like, you don't know that all these businesses are crying out for people who have got digital creative skills that young people bring, who can just think digitally, especially like in government, for example. So we have old people have an enormous issue trusting young people, trusting and listening that they know better. So unless you get an enterprise or a business which really does believe that young people know better and that they trust young people and that young people can do great things with the right framework, support, structures around it, then we won't see any change. So, I am optimistic that we have every single young person in the UK is digitally capable. They've grown up with mobiles all day. So why have we got a digital skills gap? Why? Probably, yeah, there's a couple of reasons. We haven't got enough young people coming up into business. We haven't got, them at the right age yet where they can do certain roles, but, they're all digitally capable. Let's make sure we just train them correctly and get them into jobs. So I think that young people don't necessarily know what their skills can be valued at, and businesses don't know how to value the skills young people bring. And no one is filling the gap of the trusted, these young people are good, use them position. So that's one thing where I think problem will be solved if we have more people who are backing young people and justifying the reasons why they should be paid more in jobs of responsibility sooner.
With the digital skills gap, the immediate thing that sprang to mind when you're talking about 16, 17-year-olds being the most capable to support business is that we have a traditional pathway of further education, whether that's college or university, where you have a 3 or 4 year stint at 17, 18, 19 and beyond, maybe up to 20, 21, 22, if we're down south as well, where people are studying formal qualifications that are very rarely digital related. How do we move away from that model?
I mean, obviously you've got to have the apprenticeships. Apprenticeships are so vital to pathways into businesses. They've got a little bit of toxicity in them. People don't think they're valuable as university, which is our kind of parent generation's obsession over going to university. So again, case studies of people doing great things from apprenticeships, where that leads them in their lives, and creating a really strong ecosystem which talks about the success of going directly into work versus university. Is how these things work. We all have case studies. We all need to have case studies of success in different areas to be able to show that's what we can do. Universities created a great case studies 30 years ago. It would be a fast track into a good job. It would be a good career. So that's why everyone now is sending their kids to university, because that's the case study that our parents and our parents' generation and teachers in school know about. That's the case that you need to follow, because that will make you successful. Unfortunately, being close to the pulse now, it doesn't give you the advantage that the debt brings you or the experience brings you, the advantage isn't there anymore. So if the advantage isn't there now, what's the new case study? And the new case study, in my opinion, is straight into industry.
Straight into industry. Yeah, it's certainly a big shift. I think the legacy of kind of 1997 in Blair was very much that we want to see 50% of students leaving school, going into higher education. We still have these world-renowned universities. You went to one, University of Edinburgh, I went to another, University of Glasgow, and that is what your parents want you to do because that's what they see as beneficial. But people like yourself who have great success speaking publicly and saying, can we encourage students to go straight from school into a job, into industry, is a bit of a shock to the system in that regard.
Exactly.
I guess the final kind of couple of questions for you, Dom, is with regards to going again, so to speak, with Fearless Adventures. You've clearly got a lot on your plate when it comes to trying to support change at a national level when it comes to what we do with our skilling system and people's entry to work. But what within you makes you want to go again with Fearless Adventures? And for the listeners, what is it?
What else would I do? What else would I do in my life? What else did I do? That's the question. Fearless Adventures is a different type of VC fund. So we're investing in D2C companies which are kind of 1 to 3 million revenue, profitable, and we're providing support and services to help them. So yeah, I mean, it's born out of my frustrations with seed investment. It's involved out of my frustrations with marketing. It's involved out of my frustrations with supporting entrepreneurs. So package that all together and build something which actually does help entrepreneurs as they grow and scale their businesses in a meaningful way.
One of the key things you pulled out there, we've used a lot of S words today: social change, sobriety, success. But you said their support when it came to entrepreneurs. What are some of the things that you think you can support them with that you're aware of from your own journey? You've spoken about people around you, but what else would you point to?
Obviously, personal, being able to say actually I was in the shoes once when it comes to raising money, when it comes to doing deals, all that kind of stuff. So that being able to relate to it is probably the key. And then secondly, you have kind of the fundamental challenges in business, which are quite universal. People, always the same. Problems are always the same for people. So that kind of relatability of being in their shoes is what sets it apart. And then some practical things, marketing, as we spoke about as well, agencies, model broken. You can't go and hire a full marketing team when you get investment or you're trying to grow your business, but we give people access here to a full capability of marketing straight away. So yeah, that's something which I think is different, and from what we've spoken to people in market is definitely different.
Yeah, undoubtedly, Dom. And I guess I think it'd be remiss of me not to ask you when it comes to social media, where do you see it in the next few years? Obviously, you're saying that the model's broken when it comes to people's support to clients and to businesses for them to use it as a marketing tool. But where is the platform going itself?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, thankfully, I don't care as much anymore, which is a nice thing. But I think my 2 cents is that we're addicted, we're glued to it. It's understanding more and more about us every single time we use the platform. I would just assume that it's just going to get deeper in terms of different realities, virtual reality, metaverses. And we're going to be more invested in our digital footprints than ever before. So that becomes much more important to the physical footprints. So yeah, it's just going to get deeper and more entrenched in our lives.
What's your own use of it like?
Probably not as healthy as it could be, but a lot of it is still conditioned from a work perspective. I don't really publish as much as I used to from a personal perspective. Obviously, like as you mentioned, I use LinkedIn quite a lot. So yeah, there's a little bit of a reaction bounce back against consuming in my own life. So yeah, I've got to manage that and be better at it. But you get conditioned, don't you, after doing it for every single day for 8-9 years.
Yeah, of course. And the boundaries between work and play for you and consumption and creation will probably blur a lot during that period as well.
I do, yeah.
Dom, if people want to continue the conversation with you, where should they head towards?
I mean, subscribe to my newsletter, follow me on LinkedIn, tweet me, check out firstadventures.co.uk. You'll find me around.
That sounds good, Dom. I'll pop the link for your LinkedIn below and the link to join the newsletter as well. I've just seen you've hit 10,000 subs on that, which is fantastic, and excited to read some of the content on there. Thank you once again for listening, guys. If you've enjoyed this one, take a screenshot, pop it in your Instagram story, tag me at call.cambro, and I'll be back to speak to you all again very, very soon.